Myself, Dr. Mohan Kumar TP. I'm going to discuss with you regarding research methodology. Session number 37. We are going to discuss with reference to the coding part. Before getting into coding, first a researcher he needs to collect the responses through questionnaire from the respondents. After collecting the questionnaires, he needs to check what needs to be done, what correction needs to be done, any additions, deletions, modifications through systematic editing we call systematic editing. After completion of effective and efficient editing, the coding will take place. Coding means the researcher needs to gather the data which is ununiformly. Say the sample size may be thousand, lakhs, crores to minimize the data which is collected from the field. Coding is the best method to synchronize, to minimize the size, and to get the best result. Coding has to be done. Then, what exactly the meaning of coding? Every responses needs to be systematically classified. Every responses needs to be codified. It could be qualitative data or it could be quantitative data. Both the data needs to be codified with numbers. Say for example, gender. Here the researcher may give the options male, female, others. For that, coder needs to be put male means 1, female means 2, others means 3. So it is very easy for the researcher to count how many male, how many female, and how many others. It is through systematic coding. The process of identifying and denoting a numeral to responses given by a respondent is called coding. This is essentially done in order to facilitate the researcher's use for interpreting the answers and classifying and recording the data from the questionnaire on a spreadsheet on the computer. It's very useful for the quantification and graphical representation of data into charts and figures. It becomes very easy. With the help of this pictorial diagram, how the coding process will be undertaken. See how systematically it starts with coding, classified, then for that we need to code with for the purpose of quantification through the numerical values. Then after coding, as soon as you complete the coding job, it has to be sortified, sorting systematically, then synthesizing, then theorizing. With the help of this, the real or particulars is going to be abstract or general. With the help of coding, it helps to generalizing things. Through codes is going to be categorized, then it becomes themes, and themes can be converted as a theory easily. Then what are the steps involved in coding? First, as a research coder, decide which types of coding is most relevant, because all the coding job is not going to be standardized, is not going to be uniformed. It is going to be changed according to the subject, according to the objectives, and according to the purpose, and what is a population. Everything it counts before deciding what kind of a coding is required. Then after deciding what type of coding, it has to be start coding. Create a start list of codes, because every responses has to be converted with the numerical values, because every response As I discussed earlier, it could be qualification, it could be age, it could be income status. It is going to be optional. In with every option, researcher needs to be quantified through numerical values. Then generate the categories, pattern codes we call the population. Then on the basis of the demographical variables, then on the basis of the psychographic variables, then on the basis of geographical variables, we need to categorize through pattern codes. Then test these categories against new data. Start with contrasting data early on. Because see, most of the time what happen, the categories needs to be, it has to be fixed in one or the other category. Otherwise, you have to frame the other category which is unique. The sixth step is write about categories or pattern codes in a write about the categories, pattern codes in a memo to explain their significance. Because sometimes what happen, what the category which you frame, that needs to be understood, that needs to be recorded, and you need to know what all things comes under this particular category and why this particular is going to be categorized in this, because all the information, all the responses which you gathered needs to be homogeneous. It requires homogeneity of the responses is very much required. Then what are the rules to formulate coding? It must be appropriate to the research objective, because most of the time coding, it is not just putting numbers to the responses. It requires lot of mental energy, mental exercise, what numerical values to be given and how to be given and how to be segregated. Everything needs to be set rightly. It is everything is possible only with the appropriate research objective. It has to match with the objective, the purpose. Then the coding has to be done when the response is comprehensive, mutually exclusive, single variable entry, because it should not be repeatable. It shouldn't be repeated. It has to be exclusive, mutually exclusive. Okay? It should not be repeated again and again. And the best example of a coding process is assign a label to your research question, that is response, anchor codes, code relevant statements and putting the codes under their respective anchor codes, using comment or insert endnote function, by using multiple coding methods depending on the type of research question, because coding under that you need to put multiple coding. Say for example, with reference to the income category, under that you have got rural, urban, semi-urban, semi-rural. In that again, low income group, middle income group, high income group. So multiple coding is required. The third rule is compile a list of initial codes. Initial codes, because see, we have got, while coding, we need to compile the list of initial codes, then group codes into their respective anchor codes. Tally frequency for each code. For every code, you need to identify the frequency and it has to be matched. It has to be matched. Generate categories from the codes. What the code you have developed, it has to be generate different categories. Examine the categories to generate themes. Use the themes to address the research questions. It means The coding job is not just by hatting and vomiting what the definition of coding. It is a mental process. How it has to be done. A minute mistake may get into the wrong interpretation, wrong analysis. So researcher needs to be very careful while editing and coding. So coding job may not be done by the layman. Coding job will be done by the professionals because the coding will take to the right person to the right spot with the right spirit, and he may end with the right findings. For that, coding is a lifeblood. That is the reason coding needs to be highly determined, systematic, logical. And what are the types of coding? Pre-coding means coding will be done before preparing the questionnaire. Before preparing the questionnaire, the coding has to be developed. Then post coding, after finalizing the questionnaire, after finalizing the questionnaire, the coding needs to be rechecked and rechecked till the analysis, till the stage of analysis. The coding and post coding will be, pre-coding and post coding will be, all the time it is checking and rechecking, because a lot of modification is required. Many a time it is flexible according to the needs and requirements of the research objectives. Then closed-ended structured questions coding means the question, it has got an option. Within the option, the respondents are going to be response. Say for example, gender. You have got only three options. One is male, the second one is female, the third one is others. Finished. You don't get any other options. So the responses are going to be limited or constrained to that particular options. That is called closed-ended structured questions. Comparatively, closed-ended structured questions coding is comparatively, it is easy, simple to code. What is the last one? Open-ended structured questions coding. The name itself identifies that it is open-ended. There is no restrictions, there is no constraint, there is no box, there is no boundary. Say for example, how the lady looks. How the lady looks means people may define her beauty in their own passion, in their own way. There is no there is no uniformity. So open-ended question is, it is elaborative. It is elaborative. That also to be coded systematically. That also needs to be coded systematically, which is comparatively it is complex one. It is complex one. And again, as I've said, the coding, this is where the challenging task will take place, because researcher needs to be code even the unstructured, even the open-ended questions needs to be coded systematically. Modality of coding. What are the modalities of coding? Usually the codes that have been formulated are organized into fields, records, and files. The data that is entered in the spreadsheet, such as on Excel in the form of data matrix, which is a rectangular arrangement of the data in rows and columns. One can also use a spreadsheet program such as Excel to enter the data, which have the provision of importing data from the spreadsheet. See the modality of coding. Earlier, this coding will be used to be done manually. Manually, people used to prepare a with a white sheet, with a with a A3 size sheet, people used to frame the tables, columns and rows they used to prepare, and every responses needs to be filled manually. Thanks to the technology today, we have got a different techniques to be coding. With the help of Excel and spreadsheet, we can code as number as possible. Earlier we used to have different sheets. Sometimes it used to be very messy and it was very difficult. Sometimes what the code we have given, the researcher may not be able to identify again, and the lot of confusion, dilemmas. So lot of things used to be painful. But with the help of the technology today, most of the problems is going to be minimized, I can say. Prerequisites for coding. For an effective coding system, familiar with the instructions given to the interviewers and coders. It is very much required. It is very much required. The instructions what they have taken, it has to be systematically executed while coding. Then, while crossing out an original entry, just draw a single line for legibility. They must make entries on the form in some distinctive color and in a standardized form while coding. Because when the time of coding, it is not just for a one response or two response. You may have hundreds. To minimize the dilemmas, confusion, mistake, it has to be marked with a distinctive color and standardized the form while coding. The last one is coder's initial, and note the important remarks because it's very important. While coding, what are the remarks or observation which you made? Sometimes the remarks may help, remarks what you identified may help to modify it in a better way in future. Thank you very much for listening to me.